The alarm clock buzzed at exactly 6 in the morning like it did every single day. Marcus Johnson reached over and turned it off with practiced ease. He had been doing this same routine for 3 years now, and his body knew exactly what to do. The 45-year-old man stretched his arms above his head and took a deep breath. The air coming through his bedroom window smelled fresh and clean. It was going to be a beautiful Tuesday morning. Marcus had been blind since the day he was born. His world was made up of sounds and smells and textures instead of colors and shapes. But he never felt sorry for himself. He had learned to live a full and happy life despite not being able to see. His apartment was organized perfectly so he could find everything he needed. Every item had its exact place, and he never moved things around randomly. The sound of paws clicking on the hardwood floor told Marcus that his best friend was awake too. Rex was a beautiful German shepherd with thick brown and black fur. The dog was 3 years old and had been with Marcus for most of that time. Rex was not just a pet. He was a specially trained guide dog who helped Marcus navigate the world safely every single day. What most people did not know about Rex was his incredible background. Before becoming a guide dog, Rex had been trained by the police department. He had worked as a K-9 officer for 2 years before a minor leg injury forced him into early retirement. The injury was not serious, but it was enough to end his police career. Instead of being sad about it, Rex got a new job that was just as important. He became Marcus's eyes and protector. Marcus swung his legs out of bed and planted his feet firmly on the floor. Rex immediately came over and nudged his hand gently. This was their morning greeting. Marcus scratched behind Rex's ears, and the dog's tail wagged happily. The bond between them was stronger than most people could understand. They were not just man and dog. They were partners who depended on each other completely. The morning routine was always the same. Marcus would shower and get dressed while Rex waited patiently by the bathroom door. Then they would have breakfast together. Marcus would eat his cereal and toast while Rex crunched on his special dog food. After breakfast came the best part of their day, their morning walk through Riverside Park. Marcus put on his comfortable walking shoes and grabbed his light jacket from the closet. The weather was perfect for walking. Not too hot and not too cold. Rex knew exactly what was coming next, and his excitement was obvious. The dog's tail wagged faster, and he did a little dance by the front door. Marcus smiled as he heard Rex's paws tapping on the floor. The special harness that connected Marcus to Rex hung on a hook by the door. This was not a regular dog leash. It was a specially designed guide dog harness that allowed Rex to communicate with Marcus through movement. When Rex stopped, Marcus knew there was an obstacle ahead. When Rex turned left or right, Marcus knew which direction to go. It was like having a conversation without words. Marcus clipped the harness onto Rex and checked that everything was secure. Safety was always the most important thing. Rex stood perfectly still during this process. His police training had taught him patience and discipline. Even though he was excited about the walk, he knew he had to wait for Marcus to be ready. They stepped out of the apartment building and into the fresh morning air. The sun was just starting to rise, and Marcus could feel its warmth on his face. Rex began guiding them down the familiar sidewalk toward Riverside Park. This was their favorite place to walk because it was peaceful and beautiful. The park had wide paths that were perfect for walking and plenty of interesting smells for Rex to enjoy. As they walked, Marcus listened to the sounds of the city waking up. Birds were singing in the trees. Cars were starting their engines. People were beginning their daily routines. But soon they would be in the park where everything was calm and quiet. It was going to be a perfect morning for a walk. Or so Marcus thought. The loud roar of motorcycle engines shattered the peaceful morning silence at Riverside Park. 4 heavy bikes came racing down the main road that ran alongside the park entrance. The leader of the group was Jake Morrison, but everyone called him Razor. The nickname came from his sharp temper and the way he could cut people down with cruel words. Jake was 28 years old and had been causing trouble in the town for as long as anyone could remember. Jake's motorcycle was bigger and louder than the others. Chrome pipes gleamed in the morning sunlight, and the engine made a deep rumbling sound that could be heard from blocks away. His leather jacket was covered with patches and pins that told the story of his rebellious life. Skulls and flames decorated the back of the jacket. His arms were covered in colorful tattoos that snaked from his wrists up to his shoulders. A thick chain hung from his belt, and his black boots were scuffed and worn from years of riding. Behind Jake rode his three closest friends. Tommy was a thin man with greasy hair who always agreed with everything Jake said. Pete was short and stocky with a beard that covered half his face. The third rider was Carlos, who was newer to the group but wanted to prove he belonged. All of them wore similar leather jackets and had the same tough guy attitude as their leader. The four men had spent the entire night at Murphy's bar on the other side of town. They had been drinking beer and playing pool until the bartender finally kicked them out at closing time. Instead of going home to sleep, Jake had convinced his friends to ride around and look for some fun. His idea of fun usually meant finding someone to pick on or some trouble to cause. Jake had a reputation throughout the town as a bully and troublemaker. Store owners would watch him carefully when he came into their shops. Parents would pull their children closer when they saw him coming down the street. The police knew his name well and had arrested him several times for fighting and disturbing the peace, but Jake always seemed to get out of serious trouble, and he always came back looking for more. The group pulled into the parking area near the park entrance and turned off their engines. The sudden silence felt strange after all the noise they had been making. Jake looked around with his cold blue eyes, searching for something or someone to mess with. The park was mostly empty at this early hour. A few joggers were running on the paths, and an old man was feeding ducks by the pond. Then Jake spotted something that made his cruel smile appear. Walking slowly along one of the main paths was a man with a guide dog. The man was clearly blind and was depending completely on his German shepherd to lead him safely through the park. Jake's eyes lit up with mean excitement. This looked like the perfect target for his twisted sense of humor. Jake had no respect for people he saw as weak or different. In his mind, anyone who could not fight back was fair game for his bullying. He especially enjoyed showing off in front of his friends by picking on people who could not defend themselves. The sight of the blind man and his dog gave Jake exactly the kind of opportunity he had been looking for. He kicked the stand down on his motorcycle and swung his leg over the seat. His heavy boots hit the ground with a thud, and he adjusted his leather jacket. The other three bikers followed his lead and got off their bikes. They could tell from Jake's expression that he had found their morning entertainment. Jake cracked his knuckles and started walking toward the path where Marcus and Rex were enjoying their peaceful morning walk. His friends spread out behind him like a pack of wolves following their leader. None of them had any idea what they were about to get themselves into. Marcus and Rex were walking peacefully down the tree-lined path when the sound of footsteps approached from behind. Rex's ears perked up immediately. His police training had taught him to be alert to potential threats at all times. The dog's body language changed slightly as he sensed something was not right. His muscles tensed, and his pace slowed just a little bit. Marcus felt the change through the harness, but was not sure what had caught his dog's attention. Jake swaggered up behind them with his three friends following close behind. His heavy boots made loud sounds on the concrete path. The smell of alcohol and cigarettes drifted from the group of bikers. Jake was feeling bold and confident with his friends watching. He wanted to put on a good show for them and prove how tough he was by picking on someone who could not fight back. "Hey, old man," Jake called out in a loud, mocking voice. Marcus heard the rude tone and felt uncomfortable, but he kept walking. He had learned over the years that it was usually best to ignore troublemakers and keep moving. Rex continued to guide him forward, but the dog's attention was now focused on the group of men behind them. Every instinct Rex had was telling him that these men meant trouble. Jake quickened his pace and moved around to walk beside Marcus and Rex. He looked down at the German shepherd with a mean grin on his face. "Nice-looking dog you got there," he said, but his voice carried no real compliment. Marcus nodded politely and tried to continue walking, but Jake was not finished with them yet. "What's the matter, old-timer?" Jake continued with a cruel laugh. "Can't you see I'm talking to you here?" His friends snickered behind him, enjoying the mean joke about Marcus's blindness. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment, but he tried to stay calm. He had dealt with bullies before and knew that reacting would only make things worse. Rex, however, was not going to tolerate this kind of behavior toward his partner. The dog moved closer to Marcus and positioned himself between the blind man and Jake. Rex's body language was now clearly protective. His head was raised high and his eyes were locked on Jake with intense focus. The dog's police training was telling him that this situation was dangerous and required his full attention. Jake noticed the dog's protective stance, and it made him angry. He did not like being challenged by anyone or anything, especially not by some dog. His friends were watching, and he needed to show them who was boss. Without any warning, Jake pulled back his right leg and kicked Rex hard in the ribs with his heavy leather boot. The kick landed with a solid thud, and Rex let out a sharp yelp of pain. The sound echoed through the quiet park, and several birds flew away from nearby trees. Marcus gasped in shock and horror as he heard his beloved companion cry out. He could not believe that someone would actually hurt a guide dog who was just trying to do his job. Rex stumbled from the force of the kick, but he did not run away or cower in fear. Instead, something deep inside the German Shepherd awakened. All of his police training came flooding back in an instant. Rex had been taught to protect his partner at all costs, and he had been trained to deal with criminals who used violence. The dog's entire demeanor changed in the space of a heartbeat. His ears went back flat against his head, and his lips pulled back to show his sharp white teeth. A low growl started deep in his chest, and his muscles coiled like springs ready to explode into action. Jake had just made the biggest mistake of his life. "That's what you get when you don't show respect," Jake yelled, thinking he had won the confrontation. His friends laughed and cheered him on, completely unaware that they had just awakened a sleeping giant. Rex was no longer just a guide dog. He was once again a trained police canine ready to take down a criminal. The transformation in Rex was immediate and terrifying to watch. Years of intensive police training suddenly came rushing back like a dam bursting open. Jake had no idea that he had just attacked a dog who had been specially trained to take down dangerous criminals. Rex was not just any ordinary German Shepherd. He was a weapon with 4 legs and a brain that knew exactly how to use violence when necessary. During his 2 years as a police canine, Rex had been trained in multiple combat techniques. He knew how to bring down suspects who were running away. He had learned how to disarm people who were carrying weapons. Most importantly, he had been taught how to protect his human partner from anyone who tried to cause harm. All of these skills were still locked inside his memory, waiting for the right moment to be used again. The low growl that started in Rex's chest grew louder and more menacing. His brown eyes had changed from friendly and gentle to cold and calculating. Every muscle in his 80-pound body was now coiled and ready for action. His tail had stopped wagging completely and was now held straight and stiff behind him. This was the body language of a predator who had found his prey. Marcus felt the change in his guide dog through the harness that connected them. The tension in Rex's body was so strong that it traveled through the leather straps and into Marcus's hand. He had never felt his gentle companion like this before. Rex was always calm and controlled even in stressful situations, but now Marcus could sense something powerful and dangerous building inside his dog. "Easy boy," Marcus said softly, trying to calm his partner down, but he could tell that Rex was beyond listening to normal commands. The dog's police training had taken over completely. Rex was now operating on pure instinct and years of specialized conditioning. He had identified Jake as a threat that needed to be neutralized, and nothing was going to stop him from doing his job. Jake was still laughing and joking with his friends, completely unaware of the danger he was now in. He had kicked the dog and expected it to run away or cowered in fear like most animals would do. Instead, Rex was standing his ground and showing clear signs of aggression. But Jake was too drunk and too arrogant to recognize the warning signs that any smart person would have noticed immediately. The other people in the park were starting to notice the confrontation. A woman jogging on a nearby path slowed down and looked over with concern. An elderly man who had been feeding ducks by the pond turned his head toward the sound of the commotion. Even from a distance, they could see that something serious was happening between the group of bikers and the blind man with his dog. Rex's training had taught him to wait for the right moment to strike. He did not attack randomly or out of anger. Every move he made was calculated and precise. He was studying Jake's body language and positioning himself for maximum effectiveness. The dog knew that he would only get one chance to take down his target, and he was not going to waste it. Jake made his second terrible mistake when he decided to show off even more for his friends. He thought the dog's growling was just noise, and that Rex was too scared to actually do anything about the situation. Jake had never dealt with a trained police dog before, and he had no understanding of what he was facing. His experience was limited to bullying regular pets and normal animals who would back down from a fight. The tension in the air was so thick that it seemed like time had slowed down. Marcus stood perfectly still, knowing that something big was about to happen. Rex remained in his attack position with every sense focused on Jake. The three other bikers had stopped laughing and were beginning to realize that their friend might have gotten them into more trouble than they had bargained for. Jake raised his boot again, preparing to kick Rex a second time. This would be the final mistake that would unleash years of police training and turn a peaceful morning in the park into a lesson that Jake would never forget for the rest of his life. Jake's boot was halfway through the air when Rex exploded into action like a coiled spring being released. The German Shepherd moved with the speed and precision that only years of police training could produce. His powerful jaws opened wide and clamped down on Jake's boot with crushing force. The leather crumpled under the pressure of teeth that were designed by nature to take down much larger prey than one stupid biker. The attack happened so fast that Jake barely had time to register what was occurring. 1 second he was preparing to kick the dog again, and the next second he was being pulled off balance by 80 pounds of trained muscle and determination. Rex did not just bite Jake's boot and hold on. He used his entire body weight to yank the biker's leg sideways and send him crashing to the ground. Jake hit the concrete path hard with his back and shoulders, taking the worst of the impact. The air was knocked out of his lungs with a loud whoosh, and he gasped desperately, trying to breathe again. His tough guy attitude disappeared instantly as he found himself flat on his back, staring up at the morning sky. The fall had been so sudden and violent that he was completely disoriented and confused about what had just happened to him. Rex did not let go of Jake's boot even after the biker was down on the ground. The dog's police training had taught him that suspects often tried to get back up and continue fighting after being taken down. Rex was not going to give Jake that opportunity. He maintained his grip on the leather boot and used his powerful neck muscles to shake his head back and forth, making it impossible for Jake to regain his footing. But Rex was just getting started with his counterattack. Still holding onto Jake's boot, the German Shepherd moved his body into position and placed his front paws squarely on Jake's chest. 80 pounds of solid muscle pressed down on the biker's ribcage, making it even harder for him to breathe properly. Rex's brown eyes stared directly into Jake's face from just inches away, and the dog's expression was cold and determined. The three other bikers stood frozen in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing. Their tough leader, who had seemed so confident and in control just moments before, was now pinned helplessly to the ground by a dog. Tony's mouth hung open, and he could not form any words. Pete took several steps backward, instinctively moving away from the dangerous animal. Carlos looked around nervously, wondering if they should try to help their friend or just run away. "Get this crazy dog off me," Jake screamed, but his voice was weak and shaky instead of the tough growl he usually used when giving orders. All of his bully confidence had evaporated the moment he hit the ground. He tried to push Rex away with his hands, but the dog was too strong and too well positioned. Every time Jake moved, Rex would press down harder with his front paws and tighten his grip on the boot. Rex's police training had taught him exactly how to control a suspect without causing serious injury. He was not trying to hurt Jake permanently, but he was making sure the biker could not get up and cause more trouble. The dog's weight distribution and positioning were perfect. Jake was completely immobilized, but not in any real danger of being seriously harmed. Marcus stood nearby listening to the sounds of the struggle with a mixture of concern and pride. He was worried about Rex getting into trouble for attacking someone, but he was also proud that his loyal companion had protected him from the cruel bully. Marcus could hear Jake's panicked breathing and desperate attempts to free himself from Rex's control. The transformation in the situation was complete and total. Just minutes before, Jake had been the one in control, terrorizing a blind man and his guide dog for his own twisted entertainment. Now he was the helpless victim, pinned to the ground by the very dog he had thought was weak and defenseless. The tables had turned in the most dramatic way possible. Other people in the park were starting to gather around to see what was happening. A woman with a small dog on a leash came over to investigate the commotion. Two joggers stopped their morning run to watch the scene unfold. Everyone could see clearly that the biker had gotten himself into serious trouble by messing with the wrong dog. The commotion in the park was impossible to ignore. The sound of Jake's panicked shouting and Rex's deep growling carried across the open space and attracted attention from everyone within hearing distance. What had started as a quiet morning walk was now turning into a public spectacle that would be talked about in the town for weeks to come. Sarah Martinez was jogging her usual 3-mile route when she heard the disturbance. The 35-year-old nurse had been running in Riverside Park for over 10 years and had never seen anything like this before. She slowed her pace and then stopped completely when she saw the scene unfolding on the main path. A large German shepherd had a man pinned to the ground while 3 other bikers stood around looking helpless and confused. At first, Sarah thought the dog might be attacking an innocent person, and she reached for her cell phone to call for help. But then she noticed the blind man standing nearby with a guide dog harness in his hand. She also saw the defensive posture of the dog and the way he was controlling rather than hurting the man on the ground. Her medical training helped her recognize that this was not a random attack, but a protective response to some kind of threat. Robert Chen was feeding ducks by the pond when he heard the shouting. The 70-year-old retired teacher had been coming to this park every morning for 15 years since his wife passed away. He knew every regular visitor and had seen Marcus and Rex many times during their daily walks. Robert had always admired the bond between the blind man and his faithful guide dog and had watched them navigate the park paths with perfect coordination. When Robert saw what was happening, he immediately understood that the bikers must have done something to provoke Rex's reaction. He had enough life experience to recognize bullies when he saw them, and the leather-clad men with their loud motorcycles fit the description perfectly. Robert started walking quickly toward the scene, determined to help Marcus and Rex however he could. A woman named Linda Williams was walking her small Yorkshire Terrier when she witnessed the entire incident from the beginning. She had seen Jake kick Rex without any provocation and had been horrified by the cruel and senseless act. Linda immediately pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911 while her little dog barked excitedly at all the commotion. The first person to arrive was Sarah, the jogger who had the best view of the ongoing situation. She could see that Rex was in complete control and was not actually harming Jake despite the biker's loud complaints and demands to be released. Sarah had worked in emergency rooms for over 10 years and knew the difference between controlled restraint and actual violence. "That dog attacked me for no reason," Jake yelled when he saw Sarah approaching. He thought that a witness would surely take his side and help him get free from Rex's grip. Jake was used to manipulating situations and making himself look like the victim, even when he was clearly the one who had started the trouble. But Sarah had seen enough of the incident to know exactly what had really happened. "That is not true at all," she said, firmly crossing her arms and looking down at Jake with disgust. "I saw you kick that poor dog first. You attacked a guide dog that was just trying to help a blind man. That dog is only defending himself and his owner." Jake's face turned red with embarrassment and anger. He was not used to being called out for his behavior, especially by someone who had witnessed his actions firsthand. His three friends looked uncomfortable and started backing away from the scene. They had not signed up for this kind of public humiliation and were beginning to wish they had never come to the park. Robert, the elderly man, arrived next and immediately went to stand beside Marcus. "Are you okay, son?" he asked, gently placing a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus nodded, gratefully relieved to have someone supporting him during this frightening situation. Robert then looked down at Jake with the stern expression that had intimidated countless students during his teaching career. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Robert said in a voice that carried decades of authority. "Picking on a blind man and his service dog is about as low as a person can get. I hope they throw the book at you when the police arrive." Jake tried to argue, but Robert cut him off with a sharp look that would have silenced even the most disruptive teenager. More people continued to gather around the scene. Dog walkers stopped to see what was happening. Parents with children kept their distance, but watched with curiosity. Everyone who arrived was quickly filled in on the details by the witnesses who had seen Jake's cruel behavior. The crowd was clearly on Marcus and Rex's side, and Jake was finding himself surrounded by people who had no sympathy for his situation. The sound of sirens could be heard approaching from several blocks away. Linda's 911 call had been taken seriously by the emergency dispatcher, who had sent 2 patrol cars to respond to the reported incident in Riverside Park. The morning shift officers were familiar with the area and knew that trouble at the park was usually minor, but this call mentioned an aggressive dog and potential injuries, so they were prepared for anything. Officer Maria Rodriguez was the first to arrive on the scene. She had been patrolling the downtown area for 8 years and had responded to countless calls involving disputes and disturbances. But when she stepped out of her patrol car and saw the German Shepherd holding a man down on the ground, her immediate reaction was not alarm but recognition and surprise. "Well, I will be damned," Officer Rodriguez said with a smile spreading across her face. "Rex, what are you doing here, boy?" She walked toward the scene with confidence and familiarity that surprised everyone watching. The crowd of witnesses stepped aside to let her through, while Jake continued his desperate attempts to free himself from Rex's grip. Officer Rodriguez had worked with Rex for 2 full years when he was an active member of the police K-9 unit. She knew his training, his temperament, and his incredible abilities better than almost anyone. Rex had been her partner on dozens of drug busts and had helped her arrest some of the most dangerous criminals in the city. When Rex was forced to retire due to his minor leg injury, Rodriguez had been genuinely sad to see him go. "Rex, boy, what have you gotten yourself into now?" Rodriguez said as she approached the scene. The German Shepherd's tail wagged slightly when he heard her familiar voice, but he did not release his grip on Jake's boot. His police training told him to maintain control of the suspect until his handler gave him the release command. But Rodriguez was no longer his official handler, so Rex was confused about what to do next. When Officer Rodriguez saw Marcus standing nearby with a guide dog harness in his hand, she immediately understood the situation. She had heard through the police department grapevine that Rex had been placed with a blind man as a guide dog after his retirement. Rodriguez was happy to know that her former partner had found a new purpose and was still helping people even though he was no longer on active duty. Officer Johnson arrived in the 2nd patrol car just as Rodriguez was assessing the situation. He was a newer officer with only 2 years of experience and had never worked with police dogs before. Johnson was prepared to deal with a dangerous animal attack, but instead found his experienced partner calmly greeting the dog like an old friend. The 3 bikers immediately started talking all at once, trying to convince the officers that they were the victims in this situation. Tawny pointed at Rex and claimed that the dog had attacked Jake without any warning or provocation. Pete insisted that they had just been walking through the park when the crazy animal went berserk. Carlos nodded along with his friends, hoping that the police would take their side. But the witnesses who had gathered around the scene were not going to let Jake and his friends get away with lying to the police. Sarah, the jogger, stepped forward and spoke up in a clear, strong voice. "Officers, I saw the whole thing from the beginning," she said. "That man in the leather jacket kicked the guide dog first. The dog was just protecting his blind owner. These men are not telling the truth." Robert, the elderly man, nodded in agreement and added his own testimony. I have been coming to this park for 15 years, and I know Marcus and Rex well. They are peaceful people who never cause any trouble. These bikers came here looking for someone to pick on, and they chose the wrong target. The dog only did what any good protector would do. Linda, the woman with the small dog, held up her cell phone and announced that she had called 911 the moment she saw Jake kick Rex. Several other witnesses confirmed the same story. Jake had been the aggressor and Rex had only responded to protect Marcus from further harassment and potential harm. Officer Rodriguez knelt down beside Rex and gently petted his head. The German Shepherd's tail wagged more enthusiastically, but he still maintained his grip on Jake's boot. Rodriguez knew that Rex would not release his suspect until he received the proper command from someone he trusted. She also knew that Rex's training would prevent him from causing serious injury, even while restraining a dangerous person. Rex here is a retired police dog, Rodriguez explained to the crowd and to her partner, Officer Johnson. He worked with our department for 2 years before retiring due to a minor injury. He is trained to detain suspects who commit crimes, and it looks like he was just doing what he was taught to do. If this man kicked Rex like you witnesses are saying, then he committed animal cruelty, and Rex responded appropriately. Jake's face went pale when he realized that he had not just kicked any ordinary dog, but a trained police K-9 who knew exactly how to handle criminals like himself. His tough guy act crumbled completely as he understood that his situation was much worse than he had thought. Officer Rodriguez knew that she needed to take control of the situation before it went any further. She had worked with Rex long enough to know exactly how to handle him, and she trusted his judgment completely. If Rex had detained Jake, then there was definitely a good reason for it. The multiple witness statements confirming that Jake had kicked the guide dog were all the evidence she needed to make an arrest. Rex released Rodriguez commanded, using the same firm tone she had used during their years of partnership. The German Shepherd immediately let go of Jake's boot and stepped back, but remained in an alert position, ready to act again if necessary. His police training had taught him to follow commands from authorized officers even after his retirement. Rex sat down beside Marcus and accepted the gentle praise from his current handler. Jake scrambled to his feet as quickly as he could once Rex released him. His leather jacket was torn and dirty from being on the ground. His face was red with embarrassment, and his hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline and fear. He tried to brush himself off and regain some of his tough guy image, but everyone could see that he was badly shaken by the experience. "Sir, I am placing you under arrest for animal cruelty and disturbing the peace," Officer Rodriguez announced as she pulled out her handcuffs. Jake's eyes went wide with disbelief. He had expected to get away with his bullying behavior, like he always did. The idea that he might actually face serious consequences for his actions had never occurred to him. "This is ridiculous," Jake protested weakly. "It was just a stupid dog. I barely touched the thing." But his protests fell on deaf ears. The witnesses had already told the officers exactly what had happened, and there was no denying the facts. Jake had committed a crime in front of multiple people, and now he was going to pay for it. Officer Rodriguez turned Jake around and placed the handcuffs on his wrists with practiced efficiency. "You picked the wrong dog to mess with, buddy," she said with satisfaction. "Rex here is a decorated police officer who served this community for years. Attacking him is the same as attacking any other officer. Plus, he was working as a guide dog, helping a blind man when you decided to kick him. That makes your crime even worse." The crowd of witnesses applauded as Jake was arrested. They had seen enough bullies get away with their behavior over the years, and it felt good to see justice being served for once. Marcus stood quietly beside Rex, feeling proud of his faithful companion, but also worried about what might happen next. He had never been involved in a police situation before and was not sure what to expect. Officer Johnson had been taking notes and gathering statements from all the witnesses. Their stories were consistent and clear. Jake had approached Marcus and Rex without provocation. He had made rude comments about Marcus's blindness. Then he had kicked Rex hard enough to make the dog yelp in pain. Everything that happened after that was Rex defending himself and his handler from further attack. Jake's 3 friends tried to quietly slip away from the scene, but Officer Johnson noticed them leaving and called them back. He took their names and contact information in case they were needed as witnesses later. Tommy, Pete, and Carlos were clearly embarrassed by their friend's behavior and wanted nothing more to do with the situation. They had learned a valuable lesson about the consequences of following someone who made bad decisions. The crowd began to disperse as the excitement died down. Sarah, the jogger, shook Marcus's hand and told him how sorry she was that he had been treated so poorly. Robert, the elderly man, offered to be a witness at any trial or hearing that might result from the incident. Linda promised to send her cell phone video to the police if they needed additional evidence. Officer Rodriguez helped Jake into the back of her patrol car while he continued to complain about his treatment. "You cannot do this to me," he whined. "I know my rights. I want to call my lawyer." Rodriguez had heard similar complaints from countless criminals over the years and was not impressed by Jake's protests. "Everyone has the right to call a lawyer," she replied calmly. "You can do that from the station after we book you." Before leaving, Officer Rodriguez went over to speak with Marcus and Rex one final time. She wanted to make sure that Marcus understood what would happen next and that he was not hurt by the incident. Rex seemed fine physically, but she recommended that Marcus take him to a veterinarian just to be safe. The department would cover any medical costs since Rex had been injured while protecting his handler from a criminal act. As the patrol car pulled away with Jake in the back seat, Rex wagged his tail and looked up at Marcus with pride. The German Shepherd had done his job perfectly and had protected his partner from harm. Marcus scratched behind Rex's ears and whispered words of praise and gratitude. They had both learned something important about courage and standing up to bullies that morning. News of the incident at Riverside Park spread through the town faster than anyone could have imagined. By noon that same day, the story was being shared on social media platforms and local news websites. People were fascinated by the tale of the retired police dog who had protected his blind handler from a cruel bully. Rex was quickly becoming a local celebrity and a symbol of loyalty and courage. The story reached the newsroom of Channel 7, where reporter Jennifer Walsh immediately recognized his potential. This was exactly the kind of heartwarming news that viewers love to see, especially after all the negative stories that usually dominated the headlines. Jennifer called the police department and requested an interview with Officer Rodriguez, who had worked with Rex during his active duty years. Within hours, the story had grown beyond the local area. Social media users were sharing the story with friends and family across the country. People were calling Rex a 4-legged superhero and praising him for standing up to a bully who thought he could pick on someone defenseless. The hashtag Rex, the hero, started trending on several platforms as people shared their own stories about guide dogs and service animals. Marcus was overwhelmed by all the attention, but also grateful for the support he was receiving from complete strangers. His phone had been ringing all day with calls from reporters who wanted to interview him about Rex and their partnership. Local businesses were offering free services and products to show their appreciation for what Rex had done. The veterinarian who examined Rex after the incident refused to charge for the visit, saying it was an honor to treat such a brave dog. The police department decided that Rex deserved official recognition for his actions. Chief William Brooks announced that the department would hold a special ceremony to honor Rex's continued service to the community even after his retirement. This would be the first time in the department's history that a retired K-9 officer had been called back for a special commendation. The ceremony was scheduled for the following Saturday at the police station. Local dignitaries were invited along with members of the media and anyone from the community who wanted to attend. Marcus was asked to speak about his partnership with Rex and what the dog meant to him in his daily life. He was nervous about speaking in public, but felt that Rex deserved to have his story told properly. Jake, meanwhile, was sitting in jail waiting for his court appearance. His lawyer had explained that animal cruelty charges were taken very seriously, especially when the victim was a working service dog. The fact that multiple witnesses had seen him kick Rex without provocation made his case very difficult to defend. Jake was facing significant fines, community service, and a criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. The story had also reached the guide dog training facility where Rex had received his second career preparation. The trainers were proud to hear that their graduate had performed so well under pressure. They used Rex's story as an example during their classes, showing new guide dogs in training that they might need to protect their handlers from more than just traffic and obstacles. Saturday arrived, and the police station was packed with people who had come to honor Rex. The ceremony began with Chief Brooks reading a proclamation declaring Rex an honorary member of the police department for life. Officer Rodriguez spoke about her years working with Rex and how proud she was of his continued service as a guide dog. Then it was Marcus's turn to speak. He stood at the podium with Rex sitting proudly beside him, wearing a special collar that had been made for the occasion. Marcus talked about how Rex had changed his life and given him the confidence to live independently. He explained that guide dogs do much more than just help blind people navigate streets and buildings. They provide companionship, protection, and unconditional love. Rex doesn't just guide me through the streets, Marcus said to the crowd. He guides me through life with courage and loyalty. What happened in the park last week was not unusual for Rex. He protects me every single day in ways that most people never see. He is not just my guide dog. He is my partner, my friend, and my hero. The crowd gave Marcus and Rex a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Rex seemed to understand that all the attention was for him, and his tail wagged continuously throughout the ceremony. Local news cameras captured every moment, and the story was broadcast that evening to viewers across the region. Jake was eventually sentenced to 6 months of community service and had to pay all of Marcus's expenses related to the incident. He was also required to attend anger management classes and perform volunteer work at an animal shelter. The judge told Jake that his actions had brought shame to the entire community and that he hoped the sentence would help him become a better person. Rex returned to his normal life as Marcus's guide dog, but now everywhere they went, people recognized them from the news coverage. Children would ask their parents if they could pet the famous hero dog. Store owners would wave and smile when they saw the pair walking down the street. Rex had become a local legend and a reminder that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. The story of Rex's courage spread far beyond their small town and inspired people everywhere who heard it. It became a powerful example of the special bond between humans and their service animals, and showed that standing up to bullies is always the right thing to do, no matter how small or vulnerable you might seem.